Oh, do you get notification, do you?
I don't know. I hope so.
Morning, folks. Just try to get you up on the big screen. Morning, Robert. Morning, Anne. Morning, Lorraine, Ted, Barbara, Grace, Paul, Sarah, Sandra, Doug, Ian, Alan, Wilma, Karen. We're moving fast today, folks. We'll nearly have 100 of you on board. We'll get this broadcast underway. Morning, Stephen. Sarah, going to switch that off. I don't need to hear myself in the background, thank you. Morning, Margaret. Morning, Tommy. How's things doing there, Tommy? You go down again and get a burger off you, sir. Right, where we go? 99. Come on, 100. That's 100 of you on board. So, good morning, folks. Indytruck. Davy, out the truck and in the South of Salisbury, where it's, hey, sunny, nice morning, and 11 degrees. It's supposed to go up as high as 15 or 16 this afternoon, so it should be quite nice. So that's your weather forecast for Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. You want to know what the weather's like where you are? Look out the bloody windy. Alright, so we'll start with the latest figures on COVID. These figures were issued on Friday. We'll get the updated figures today. Alright, now the latest COVID figures are, as I say, are for Friday. The 4,196 new cases were reported on Friday. 2,048 people were in hospital, 20 of which were in the intensive care units. 40 deaths were reported on Friday, and that was the last, as I say, the last reporting period for the COVID figures. We'll get the update about 2 p.m. today. Alright. So okay, so let's move on and have a look at some of the big stories that were over the weekend, because obviously we're doing the weekend review of the weekend type thing. Like last week, I'm only picking a couple of stories per day, because let's face it, I am trying to get this down to a 30-minute programme, and I'm trying to take my friend Ruth Watson's advice and no overdo it. Alright, so let's get moving on. Alright, Friday. The big story on Friday, of course, was the UK government's plan to export young Asian, African, Arab and Arabic men to Rwanda when they land on the English coast in small crafts. Alright, now the outrage and the outcry about it was universal. But we had the buttons for the government stand up one after another and basically say, la la la, we're going to ship these coloured people away, and you haven't got a better idea on how to break up the people smuggling rings, which are, these people are paying to get into dinghies to come across the English Channel. Well, you know, sending these kids to Rwanda isn't going to help. Now, early weekend with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, came out and slated the government. We had that boy Solomon, the head of the Refugee Council, come out and slate the government. In fact, you get right down to it, nobody's keen on this idea at all except for the government. They're a bunch of bloody racist white supremacists. I've said this before. Okay, now the evil one, Priti Patel, she tells opponents of the plan to shut up as they don't have any better ideas. I've got a better idea, go after the bloody people smugglers. Now, there's a bit, I mean, this exporting these young men to Rwanda doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because I don't know whether this government has realised or no, but they must have done. After all, they implemented Brexit. We actually have a workforce shortage. We have a shortage of people to work in certain sectors within industry here in the UK. These are young fit men who could be working in abattoirs, who could learn to drive buses and trucks, who could go into production or food picking. We actually need people. Because of Brexit, and yet because of their own colour, they're getting shoved onto planes and shipped out to Rwanda at a cost of 30 grand a pop. Now, you just think about these young men coming in. We've got a massive workforce shortage. And the 28,000 people arrived last year. The bulk of them, according to the government, were economic migrants. Well, guess what? We have got places in our economy where we need the workforce. And Davy said this before, don't ship them to Rwanda, ship them to us. We'll look after them, we'll train them here in Scotland, we'll put them to work here in Scotland. It'll increase our tax take as well, as these young people become productive within our economy. None of this makes any sense other than the fact that they're white supremacist racist gets down that road. And as Davy said, you know, it's alright for the Ukrainians to get here, they're not being shipped to Rwanda. Why? Because they're the right colour, they're white. Miss Sturgeon, in her assessment of the plan to send people to Rwanda, made it quite clear that she thought it was racist and inhumane. Because we all know that the elite doing that road are bloody racist. We know that. Prince Philip, you know, Bojo and his Piccaninny smiles. We know they're white supremacists and racists. So absolutely outrageous. And of course it's breaching international law. You know. And Friday it comes out that they're not outsourcing these people to be processed. They're being sent out there never to return. Which breaches the law on the rights of the refugee to seek asylum. Because they're not getting to seek asylum. They're getting put on planes and shipped out. They're being exported to Rwanda. Right, let's move on and see what other stories we've picked out. Also over the weekend, the Russians sanctioned various UK politicians and banned them from going to Russia. So, who's on the ban list? Bojo the Clown, Liz Truss, Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak, Ben Wallace, the Defence Minister doing that road, and up here we have got Miss Sturgeon being told she's no welcome in Russia either. To which end Miss Sturgeon shrugged her shoulders and said she'd no plans to go to Russia anyway. You know, as if Miss Sturgeon cares that Putin says she's not to visit. She'd no plans to visit anyway. But this, of course, is tit for tat stuff, you know. And as Davy said, when the sanctions were being put on Russia, sanctions work both ways. There has been a massive impact on the cost of living here because of sanctions against Russia, because things that we would normally get for Russia, we don't get it now. Because it wasn't just Ukraine, we got things like flour and that for into Europe. You know, so cost of living crisis has been exacerbated by the sanctions, because sanctions work two ways. And as I say, Putin's announced that Miss Sturgeon's banned. And I seen the other weekend the Alpha Party laughing and saying, well, Mr. Salmon's not been banned. Well, guess what? Mr. Salmon worked for the Russians on the banned network, Russia Today. So, you know, Mr. Salmon was in there anyway. But, you know, even if they did ban Mr. Salmon, as if he'd care either. He's no plans to go to Russia. You know. Absolutely mental. So there you go, Miss Sturgeon's been banned for Russia. Right, also, over the weekend, it's reported that the phones in the PM's office and the Home Office have been targeted by spyware. So now, Citizens Lab tells Number 10 that the Pegasus spyware was installed on the telephones in Number 10 and in the Home Office in 2020 and again in 2021. Now, the Pegasus spy software is sold by a company called NSO, which is Israeli, and it's believed it was the United Arab Emirates which bugged the Home Office and bugged Number 10. Bojo's a security threat all on his own. And now the United Arab Emirates allegedly have installed spyware in Number 10's phone and the Home Office phone. Now, what does this spyware do? Well, this spyware is designed to collect and follow telephone numbers, pick up passwords, pick up email addresses, and read texts, right? So, you know, so much for the UK's famous security, yeah. MI5 couldn't work out that the Prime Minister and the Home Office had been bugged. It took the Citizens Lab to tell them. Yeah, think tank. Hello, Number 10, just so you know. And by the way, Arab Emirates, remove your spyware from this phone, will you? Because I'm just telling Number 10 it's there. Bottins. So there you go. Anyway, NSO, as I say, is an Israeli company, said, wasn't it us, Gov? And he said that that the Citizens Lab are making it up. Okay. Right, so let's move on. Over the weekend, right, Miss Sturgeon's reported to police for entering a barber shop in East Kilbride without putting on her face mask first. The First Minister put her mask on after a few seconds of entering the store, but there was footage out there, so the unionists, being absolute bampots, reported Miss Sturgeon to the police, and that's the big story, isn't it, here in Scotland. Miss Sturgeon's 20-second lapse of memory is being put up there on a level the same as Partygate. And it appears the unionists were calling on Miss Sturgeon to resign at the weekend and are going after her nut that the police didn't fine her for her 20-second lapse of memory. But if I remember right, Police Scotland all the way through this has taken a gentle approach to these regulations and haven't fined many people for very much, actually, when you get right down to it. And mask wearing isn't one of the things that they were issuing fines for. Let's face it, they'd be on enough every bus and every bloody train. They wouldn't be enough police officers. But anyway, Police Scotland spoke to Miss Sturgeon and reminded her she had to follow her own rules. Wow. Huh? As I say, the cuckoos in the nest all went after Chump. Resign, resign, resign. You imagine the Tories claiming and shouting at Miss Sturgeon to resign when the leader is telling us that Boris Johnson has to stay in place, even though he has broke the bloody law and has been fined and is likely to be fined up to 5 more times. But here we have Dross calling on Miss Sturgeon to resign, while the hypocrite tells us that Bojo has to stay in place because there's a war in the eastern part of the European continent. Wow, you couldn't make this push up, could you? Unbloody believable. Right, also over the holiday weekend, the haunted pencil Jacob Rees-Mogg tells ministers to get civil servants back into the office. As far as Westminster is concerned, the pandemic's over. Nothing to see here. Get your civil servants back into the office, Mogg tells ministers. So ministers will be issuing the directive for civil servants to get back into their offices rather than working from home. Alright, and also at the weekend it's revealed that NHS Scotland has hired 1,000 new members of staff. NHS Scotland is scouring the world for staff at this point because we can't get VU anywhere. With 191 new nurses from overseas coming in and joining the service, there's another 203 on their way apparently. The recruitment agency's got another 203 on their way. Humza Yousaf, the Scottish Health Minister, says that most of the 1,000 staff are support staff, and they're looking to recruit more nurses and doctors from overseas, as well as you know, the Scottish Government have implemented new training courses to train their own doctors and nurses as well, with bursaries to go with it, unlike that shower of crap down the road which is actually charging to train nurses and doctors. So there we go, a wee bit of good news. And the cuckoos in the nest, they're not happy with the 1,000 extra workers. They say it's just not enough. And they're probably right going forward as we move into what we will have a national care service as well as a national health service. They're going to have to recruit and train an awful lot of people. An awful lot of people, right? And of course Monday sees, after all the discussion about Miss Sturgeon and her mask, Monday sees the last COVID restrictions lifted here in Scotland, with the legal requirement to wear face coverings no longer in place. Now, Professor Jason Leach takes to the airwaves yesterday and makes a plea that we all continue to wear face coverings because he's worried about the NHS getting overwhelmed. And so face coverings are no longer compulsory, but they are still guidance. It is guidance to continue to wear your face coverings, even though there's no legal requirement for you to do it. So Davy would suggest that you continue to wear your face coverings. Yeah. Okay. The prevalence of COVID is still quite high. The First Minister also made a plea that folk continue to wear their face coverings, and apparently polling at the weekend shows that people will continue to wear their face coverings, which is good news. And talking about polling at the weekend, well, Bojo's not happy with the poll coming out at the weekend, does he? The Tories are now 7 points behind Labour, and it looks like they're going to take an absolute drubbing in these local elections. An absolute drubbing. There was also poll ratings out for the cabinet members as well, and it looks like Rishi Sunak's went from being the sunshine of the Conservative Party to being bombed. He's absolutely bombed. He's been doing like just no much chance Sunak's ever going to take it off of Boris Johnson. Liz Truss's ratings were crap. Bojo's ratings were absolutely dreadful. So the poll out at the weekend was absolutely atrocious for them. Now, as you know, we've got the local elections coming up on the 5th of May in England and in Scotland, and they have the Stormont parliamentary elections or assembly elections coming up in Northern Ireland. Now, the Northern Ireland thing's a wee bit weird because they have to get into what's called a compulsory coalition, and the way things operate out there are a wee bit different. But we'll keep an eye on what's going on in Northern Ireland because, let's face it, people generally don't keep an eye on what's going on in Northern Ireland. Fortunately, we have our own Northern Ireland correspondent in Fiona, and she keeps us up to date with what's going on out there in Northern Ireland. Okay, now let's get our bahookies out of Ukraine and see what's going on out there, shall we? Well, it looks like the war in Ukraine has more or less coalesced in the southeast of Ukraine in the Donbass and Luhansk regions. It looks as if Putin's objective is to conquer those two areas where he recognises People's Republics of Luhansk and the Donbass, right? So it looks as if it's concentrating in the south of the Ukraine, southeast of Ukraine. The new front line is 300 miles long, and all the analysis says the same thing. Even if Putin can take these two parts of the Ukraine, it's very doubtful that he'll be able to hold it. The people don't want him there in the first bloody place. So what's going to happen is he'll go and take out the Luhansk and the Donbass regions of Ukraine, and what will happen is the forces there will go underground, and we'll have a situation like you had in France, where there'll be a resistance, and Putin will find it very, very difficult to hold on to these places. And as we already know, the Ukrainians have had a couple of wee successes last week, and that is that they sank the Russians' flagship in the Black Sea, the Moskva, and it's been reported that they've also hit another boat out there, so Putin will be starting to worry. Mr. Zelensky, of course, is still screaming for the West to close the skies above Ukraine. What he's saying is they can't win this war while Russia has air superiority, and that's where most of the trouble's coming from, the skies. And Ukraine doesn't have the air force to combat it, so Zelensky's still wanting the West to close the skies above Ukraine. But as we know, NATO doesn't want to get involved because of the fear of escalation and that we end up in World War III. So that's the situation in the Ukraine early weekend. Putin's moved his main forces in the centre of attack to the southeast of Ukraine, where he intends to take the Donbass and Luhansk regions. But what he's going to do with them once he's taken them, nobody's quite sure. We do know he wants that land bridge through the Donbass to the Crimea. But as I say, nobody's got any idea what he's really up to, because even if he does take these areas, even if he takes the full Ukraine, the Ukrainians don't want him there. You know, he's never going to be able to hold the bloody place. And that's been the Ukraine. Ukraine's had this problem for 300 years. I don't know if you're aware of the history of Ukraine. But the West and the East have been struggling over the Ukraine for 300 years because, let's face it, it's the gateway into Russia, isn't it? So if the West want to attack Russia, they'll go through Ukraine. And if the Russians want to attack Europe, they need to come through Ukraine. So Ukraine's been in the middle of a tug of war with the West and the East for the last 300 years. And it looks as if it's going to continue. Now, the speculation is this is either going to be in a couple of months because, let's face it, Putin will take these areas and then he'll have problems holding them. Or the other theory coming out at the moment is this could last for bloody years because they need to take the whole Ukraine apart. And of course, we're getting the speculation that once he's taken Ukraine, he'll move on to other areas in the east, which used to be part of the Russian Empire. Not the Soviet bloc, but the Russian Empire. They were two different things. Okie dokie. So that's the update on Ukraine. Right, let's get this morning and see what the rags have got to say, because that's us, we're 19 minutes in, so we'll better get it up on the screen today and have a good laugh. Alright. Now the Scotsman has Sturgeon sorry as police take no action over masks. They were never going to take action over it. You know. Let's face it, the mask rule was finishing on Monday anyway. And the cuckoo's in the nest, they just right at the top. What else have we got here? We've got Boris Johnson faces MPs for first time since lockdown. Fine. And SNPers to follow UK's rail fare sale. Aye, right, okay. So apparently there's a sale at half price rail fares down that road, and the cuckoos in the nest want Miss Sturgeon to do the same up here, right? The Scottish Daily Express, the right-wing loony paper, has got First Minister issues apology as police say she faces no further action. Sorry Sturgeon let off by cops after mask breach. What a lot of piss. Wow. And the Daily Telegraph has police have to remind Sturgeon of mask rules. There you go. Well, what bollocks. And apparently costly green energy levies may be scrapped in order to bring down the cost of living crisis a wee bit. The Metro has cops tell First Minister follow your own rules. Sturgeon sorry as police give SNP leader ticking off over breaching mask laws. So they did, aye. They phoned her up and say, alright Miss Sturgeon, remember, don't get caught without putting your mask on again. That would have been that. The Scottish Daily failed, the other right-wing loony rag has. FM spoken to police after mask rule breach, but force say no further action necessary. Sturgeon sorry for breaking own COVID law. Again, apparently. Right. The Record has Johnson's walk of shame, Partygate showdown. The National has police take no action over FM mask complaint. And apparently the Tories ramp up pro-union ad spend. Exclusive Facebook cash from Jack's offices boosted by thousands from other departments. It's a shabby underhand attempt to buy votes in council elections, says SNP President Mike Russell. And what Pete Wishart's saying is why you really should vote till you poke. In other words, what he's saying is, however many people are on the ballot paper, grade them. Alright. What else we got? The Herald has Russian parades captured Britons on TV asking Johnson for help. And this is a story of two men that have been captured in the Donbass region. And they're on the television asking for a swap. They want a pro-Russian Ukrainian politician, a pro-Kremlin politician, hold the door so that these guys can get home. That's what they want. They want an exchange, alright. The Times has Sturgeon gets police warning but no fine after mask law break. Away and don't talk piss. 20 seconds. 20 seconds it took her to put her mask on. That's it, you know. That was it. Hey, talk about storming a teacup. And the main headline in the Times is Zelensky's next phase of the war has begun. And we know that. We've just spoke about it. As I say, the new front line is 300 miles long, for Christ's sake. The eye has nowhere is safe. Russia's major escalation leads to fears for Ukrainian civilians. Sorry folks, civilians die in war.
Yeah.
Why it is.
Aye.
What else we got? And the Star, well the Star really does it today folks. The Star's right on form today. You ready for this one? The Star has NASA risks war with ET by pinging Earth's location to the galaxy, says Space Boffin. Don't beam us up. So apparently, NASA's pinging the location of the Earth out into the galaxy to try and find ET. But this Boffin thinks ETs want to come for a fight. And that NASA's putting us all at risk. There you go. Right, so that's it. Just picked a few stories out of the weekend to have a chat about, folks. I say I'm taking Ruth's advice and I'm trying to scale back a wee bit. So that's what I've got for you. I hope you found it entertaining. I hope you found it informative. Right, so let's get to the usual stuff. Alright, the campaigning for the local elections is really starting to ramp up. I think the Alpha Party's got their manifesto released today, and they'll put forward what their plans are for the local elections. As I say, but it's really starting to ramp up. As I say, the Tory party are trying to buy the election, but it's not going to work for them. But remember, folks, when it comes to independence, put your partisan politics back in your pockets, learn how you gonies, and get out there and win hearts and minds. Alright, now support the independent media, folks, alright? There's some people out there doing some really good stuff. Maximilian Robespierre, David and I have set up a new channel. Stephen Kelly's got a couple of channels on the go. You've got Wee Ginger Dog, you've got Bateman, you've got Leslie Riddock, all out there doing great stuff. So support the independent media, and if they've got a crowdfunder going and you've got a few shekels in your pocket, which is highly bloody unlikely with the cost of living crisis, please throw them in to keep these guys going. They do fantastic work, alright? Now, when it comes to health messaging, face masks in enclosed public spaces, even though the legal requirement is gone, follow the guidance and wear your face mask in enclosed public spaces. Clean hands and surfaces regularly. When it comes to social distancing, use your napper. There's still an awful lot of this COVID in the community. So have a look about you and say, if I was asymptomatic, how would it affect the people around me? So when it comes to social distancing, use your napper. I'm afraid free tests have come to an end.
Shame.
Which is a daft idea. Lateral flow tests should have been continued, especially with the prevalence of the virus so high at the moment. As we know, the Office for National Statistics on Friday tell us 1 in 13 people in the community have COVID at this point in time. So it's quite high, alright? So keep testing until you run out, and if you can afford to buy a weekly test at £2.75 down at Boots. Alright, Sarah, do you mind?
No, I don't mind.
Bloody hell, the director's bloody interrupting all the time here, folks. If you can afford to go down and buy a test every once a week, say they're saying it's £1.87. The prices I've seen on the internet are £2.50. But if you can afford to get a test each week, then have one. Alright. Be back tomorrow to do it all again. I think I'll still be, I don't know whether I'll be in the cab or in the house tomorrow, but we'll get a report on Bojo's walk of shame into the Commons today. And we'll be watching closely to see him taking pelters off everybody. Alright, look after yourself. See you tomorrow.